The trading floor hummed with tension. Stock prices flickered. Deals closed in seconds. Evelyn Mercer stood in the center of it all, her empire stretching from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. She wasn't just a player in the financial world. She owned it. Her name commanded respect. Her company, Mercer Capital, controlled billion-dollar investments. CEOs feared her. Investors chased her. Rivals plotted against her. But no one could touch her. She had built her fortune from nothing. No inheritance. No trust fund. Just sharp instincts, relentless ambition, and a refusal to lose. But beneath her steel exterior, a scar remained, one she never spoke of. 20 years ago, Evelyn had nothing. A small apartment, a baby on the way, an empty bank account. She had been in love once. Victor Harrington, heir to one of the richest families in the country. He had promised forever. She had believed him. Then he walked away, left her for wealth, for power, for a woman with an empire already built. He never looked back. She had called, begged, pleaded. He never answered. Then, the final blow, her child taken from her. She never saw the baby again. No name, no records, nothing. Victor erased them both. That night, Evelyn Mercer died. And the woman who replaced her? She never begged again. The first years were brutal. She worked 3 jobs, lived on scraps, learned everything she could about finance, investments, power. She clawed her way up, one brutal deal at a time. She took risks no one else would. She won, over and over again. She played the game better than the men who tried to crush her. Mercer Capital was born from sweat and blood. She turned a $10,000 loan into billions. By 40, she was untouchable, a financial queen, a kingmaker. The world knew her as the woman who never lost. But she knew better. She had already lost something far greater. She didn't know him, didn't recognize the name. Daniel Harrington. Young, brilliant, ruthless, the rising star of the finance world. CEO of Harrington Global. He was ambitious, aggressive, dangerous, and he had a singular target. Her. Evelyn saw the signs. A new player circling her empire, acquiring her partners, attacking her investments. He was building toward something, a full-scale takeover. She watched. She waited, let him make his moves. Then she struck. A counterattack so sharp it made him bleed. A warning. She expected retaliation. What she didn't expect was what came next. Daniel wasn't working alone. Behind him, a shadow, an old name, one she thought she had buried. Victor Harrington, the man who left her in ruins, the man who stole her child. Her past had come back to destroy her, and it wore the face of a stranger. Evelyn stood in her office, staring at the files spread across her desk. A single photograph lay on top. Daniel Harrington, standing next to Victor. The resemblance was unmistakable. Her lost child, her greatest enemy. The war had just begun. The city skyline stretched before her, a sea of glass and steel reflecting the golden glow of dawn. Evelyn Mercer stood in the heart of it, the undisputed queen of finance, untouchable, unshakable. Mercer Capital wasn't just a company. It was an empire, a fortress built from sheer will, brutal intelligence, and unrelenting refusal to lose. Every major corporation wanted her investments. Every CEO feared her. She had crushed rivals, outmaneuvered the most cunning businessmen, and risen from nothing to become the most formidable woman on Wall Street. No one dared challenge Evelyn Mercer. She had fought for everything. Every deal, every dollar, every ounce of respect. She had built herself from the ashes of a life once stolen from her. Her name was whispered in boardrooms, feared on trading floors, respected in circles where power dictated everything. But power made enemies. And Evelyn, despite everything, had made more than her fair share. She was too strong, too successful, too untouchable. Someone wanted her empire, and they were about to take it. Daniel Harrington was young, brilliant, and vicious, a predator in a designer suit. He had risen fast, too fast. In just 5 years, He had turned Harrington Global from an aging financial institution into a corporate monster. Ruthless acquisitions, backdoor deals, fearless takeovers. People whispered that he was Victor Harrington's son in every way that mattered, cutthroat, brilliant, and born to dominate. Groomed for power since childhood, he had spent his life preparing for one thing: control. And now, he had set his sights on Mercer Capital. To him, Evelyn Mercer was a relic, a woman who had held the throne for too long. She was powerful, yes, but age was creeping in. The industry was shifting. It was time for new blood. His blood, his father, Victor, had guided him toward his biggest move yet. The takeover of Mercer Capital wouldn't just make headlines. It would cement him as the next titan of finance. He had studied Evelyn for months, knew her weaknesses, her enemies, the cracks in her foundation. He would exploit them all. She wouldn't even see it coming. The boardroom was packed. A dozen men in tailored suits, murmuring in hushed voices. Journalists swarmed the lobby, smelling blood. Evelyn strode in, poised and powerful. She expected the usual: strategic discussions, aggressive negotiations, perhaps a minor challenge from a rival firm. Instead, she walked into an ambush. A thick folder landed on the polished mahogany table. Paper spilled out. Fraud, financial misconduct, irregularities in her company's accounts. False. All of it. She picked up the documents, her mind racing. The numbers didn't add up because they had been altered. A setup. Her eyes scanned the room. The board members avoided her gaze. Their silence was damning. The CEO of Harrington Global stood across from her, arms folded, expression unreadable. Daniel Harrington. His voice was smooth, calm. Mercer Capital has suffered significant leadership failures. It's time for a transition. The words hit like a bullet. She turned to her board. The men she had trusted. The empire she had built. Cowards. Traitors. One by one, they voted her out. Unanimous. Security entered. The chair at the head of the table, the one she had occupied for over a decade, was no longer hers. Then came the next blow. Her accounts, frozen. Her assets, locked. Her name, dragged through the mud. The media feasted on the scandal, turning her from financial queen to corporate villain overnight. Mercer Capital CEO Evelyn Mercer accused of fraud. Her empire was gone, but the worst was yet to come. The office was empty, stripped of power, stripped of everything. Evelyn stood frozen, her mind reeling. Then a voice, familiar, cold. You never belonged in our world. She turned. Victor Harrington, a face from the past, a ghost she thought she had buried. 20 years. He hadn't changed. Still powerful, still cruel. His eyes held no warmth, no regret, only victory. This was inevitable, Evelyn, he continued. You climbed too high, but you were always an outsider. A mistake. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't flinch. Then, another voice. You should have stepped aside. Daniel, standing beside Victor, his stance strong, confident, his smirk cutting. The final betrayal. The war wasn't just business. It was personal. Evelyn's eyes flickered between them. Daniel, his face, his posture, his eyes. Something familiar, something wrong. But there was no time to question it. Victor gestured toward the door. You're done here. Daniel stepped closer. Step aside, Ms. Mercer. You're yesterday's news. The final blow. Evelyn turned, back straight, shoulders squared. She walked past them without a word. Not broken. Not yet. But inside, a storm was building. They thought they had won. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. As Evelyn walked out of the building, past the flashing cameras and the roaring headlines, one thought burned in her mind. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The world thought Evelyn Mercer was finished. The media tore her apart. Stock prices for Mercer Capital plummeted. The headlines screamed scandal, fraud, disgrace. Her empire was shattered. But Evelyn Mercer wasn't broken. She vanished from the public eye. No press conferences, no statements, no desperate attempts to clear her name. That wasn't her style. Instead, she watched. She listened. She plotted. She had spent years building Mercer Capital from nothing, and she knew every crack in the foundation, every loophole in the system, every secret the Harringtons thought they had buried. Now it was time to use them. She needed a team. Not just any team, the right people. First, she needed a lawyer. Not just a suit who talked big in the courtroom. Someone ruthless. Someone who played dirty. Enter Calloway, ex-prosecutor, known for making cases disappear before they even reached a judge. He had a reputation for getting his clients out of impossible situations, and he hated the Harringtons. Within hours, he was already combing through the forged documents that had ruined her. There were gaps, inconsistencies, a trail of breadcrumbs leading back to the Harringtons. Next, she needed someone on the inside, someone who knew the Harrington empire better than they knew themselves. Liam Cole, former Mercer Capital executive, once her right-hand man, until the board forced him out years ago. He had no love for the Harringtons. More importantly, he knew where the bodies were buried. Liam still had contacts inside Harrington Global. They talked, and what they told him made Evelyn smile for the first time in weeks. The Harringtons weren't as untouchable as they thought. Finally, she needed a ghost in the machine. Vera Kane, a name whispered in the darkest corners of the financial world. No face, no history, just a trail of destroyed companies and exposed billionaires. No one knew where she was. But Evelyn had spent her life making powerful connections. A single call to the right person, and Vera was listening. Within 2 days, Vera had hacked into Harrington Global's private servers. What she found would burn them to the ground. The pieces were in place. Evelyn wasn't just going to fight back. She was going to destroy them. First, Evelyn needed money. Real money. Her assets had been frozen, her accounts locked. But she wasn't stupid. She had always kept a hidden war chest. Offshore accounts, untraceable investments, funds tucked away in places even the IRS wouldn't find. Now she moved fast, shifted assets, pulled favors. Within a week, she had $200 million at her disposal, enough to strike back. Next, she went after their reputation. The media had turned against her, but Evelyn knew something about power. Truth didn't matter, perception did. She leaked carefully chosen pieces of information, not obvious attacks, not desperate denials. Hints. A suspiciously well-placed source suggested Harrington Global had been involved in shady deals. Another insider hinted at accounting irregularities in their books. A former employee accidentally let slip that Daniel Harrington wasn't as brilliant as everyone thought. It wasn't a full assault, not yet. Just enough to plant doubt. Enough to make their investors nervous. She reached out to old rivals. The CEOs who once fought against her. The men who had tried and failed to take her down. Now, they saw an opportunity. The Harringtons had made enemies, too. Powerful ones. She met with them quietly. Promises were made. Deals were struck. One by one, the Harringtons' allies started slipping away. Then, she made her first real move. Through a shell corporation, she bought a controlling stake in one of Harrington Global's key subsidiaries. A small acquisition, nothing that would make headlines. But it gave her something crucial, leverage. She blocked a major merger they had been planning for months. The deal collapsed. Investors panicked. Stock prices dipped. It was a warning shot. Evelyn Mercer was not done yet. Victor Harrington didn't panic. Instead, he did what he always did. He went to war. He used his political connections to squeeze Evelyn's remaining assets. Sylvia Harrington, a master of manipulation, pulled strings in media, planting stories that Evelyn was a bitter, desperate woman grasping for power. But Daniel took it personally. He doubled down, launching a hostile buyout of Evelyn's remaining businesses. If he couldn't destroy her, he would erase her completely. He didn't know who she was. Not yet. The Harringtons dug into her past. They tried to find dirt. Old scandals, business failures, anything to smear her reputation further. Then they went after her team. They offered Liam Cole a deal. Double his salary if he switched sides. They traced Vera Kane's digital fingerprints, sent threats. They found out Calebroth had a secret, something that could ruin his career. Evelyn's team started cracking. Who could she trust? Then the Real hit came. Evelyn's closest friend, the only person she had let into her life outside of business, was attacked. A break-in, a stage robbery, a warning. The message was clear: back down, or people you love will suffer. And just as she thought she had the upper hand, someone on her team turned against her. The one person she never expected. The betrayal was sudden, ruthless. Confidential plans were leaked to the Harringtons. Her next move, compromised. Had she been outplayed? Had she trusted the wrong person? Or was there still one final move left? Evelyn stared at the leaked documents. Someone close to her had sold her out. She had been betrayed again. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. The game wasn't over. Not even close. The boardroom was full. Men in tailored suits. Women in sharp dresses. The power brokers of Wall Street, gathered like vultures, waiting to feast on the remains of Mercer Capital. At the head of the table sat Victor Harrington. His face was unreadable, but his body language screamed victory. Sylvia, perched beside him, barely contained her smirk. Daniel, sharp-eyed and confident, was prepared to close the final chapter on Evelyn Mercer. The meeting was set to finalize Mercer Capital's complete acquisition by Harrington Global. The final nail in the coffin. Evelyn was out, forgotten, done, or so they thought. The doors swung open. Evelyn Mercer walked in. Silence. She didn't ask for permission, didn't wait for an invitation. She owned the room the second she stepped inside. A thick folder landed on the table with a resounding thud. Victor's smirk wavered. "What is this?" he demanded. Evelyn's voice was cool, sharp as a blade. "Proof." She flipped the folder open. Pages slid across the polished wood. Documents, bank transfers, offshore accounts, wire fraud. Every illegal deal Victor Harrington had ever made laid out in black and white. Gasps, murmurs. Chairs shifted. She leaned forward, her voice calm. "Deadly. You stole billions. You laundered money through fake companies. You buried losses by cooking your books. And you thought no one would find out." A pause. Then she dropped the final bombshell. Daniel's birth certificate. Victor's name. Evelyn's name. The room went deathly still. Daniel stared at the paper, his hands unmoving. His entire world cracked apart. Victor was the first to speak, his voice low but venomous. "This is ridiculous." Evelyn turned, eyes locked on him, daring him to deny it. Sylvia's nails tapped against the table. Even if this were true, no one would care. She gestured dismissively. "This is business." Evelyn smiled. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, sleek remote, clicked it. The wall screen blinked to life. A live news broadcast. A reporter standing outside Harrington Global's headquarters. Breaking news. Federal authorities have launched an official investigation into billionaire Victor Harrington. Sources say the case involves fraud, tax evasion, and illegal business practices spanning over 2 decades. The murmurs turned into chaos. Phones buzzed. Executives whispered. The board was turning. Victor pushed back his chair, face twisted in fury. "You think you can—" The doors burst open. Federal agents flooded in. "Victor Harrington," an officer announced. "You are under arrest." Handcuffs clicked. A billionaire dragged from his own empire in front of the people he had once ruled. The ultimate humiliation. Evelyn stepped closer, leaned in, whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "I built everything you tried to take from me, and now I own you." Victor was gone. Sylvia froze, eyes wide, hands clenched into fists. She was next. The moment Victor was pulled from the boardroom, everything unraveled. Stock prices crashed. News spread like wildfire. Harrington Global was in free fall. Reporters swarmed the company's headquarters. Investors pulled out. Board members scrambled to distance themselves. The empire was collapsing. Victor had spent his life erasing Evelyn, destroying her, burying her. Now he was the one buried. As Victor's world fell apart, Sylvia fought to survive. She had connections. She had money. But Evelyn had something better, the truth. Within hours, a flood of leaked documents exposed Sylvia's hidden dealings. Bribery, manipulation, blackmail. The media pounced. The elite social circles she thrived and turned against her. Billionaire wives whispered behind their champagne glasses. Her invitations vanished. She was a queen without a throne. No power, no status, no empire. And Evelyn? She walked past her with a smirk. Sylvia's lips parted, searching for words. But there was nothing left to say. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. Daniel stood at the head of the table, staring at the papers that had just shattered his life. Victor, his mentor, his father, his role model, nothing more than a fraud. His empire, built on lies. And Evelyn Mercer, his greatest enemy? His mother. A silence stretched between them. She had known. She had always known. "Did you ever wonder?" she asked, voice quieter now. "Did you ever look in the mirror and see him?" Daniel swallowed, his hands clenched, shaking. Everything he had worked for, fought for, gone. What had his life even meant? Was he even his own man? Evelyn didn't wait for an answer. She had won. Now, it was his choice what happened next. Taking back what was hers. The board members turned to Evelyn. There was no argument left. No opposition. She was back. Mercer Capital was hers again. But she wasn't just taking back what was stolen. She was expanding, with Victor rotting in a prison cell, Sylvia exiled from power, and Daniel adrift. Evelyn took what remained of Harrington Global and absorbed it. Every company, every asset, every last piece of their legacy. She didn't just win back her empire. She destroyed theirs. The final goodbye. As Victor was led past her in handcuffs, she tilted her head slightly. "You tried to erase me," she said, "but I'm still here. And you? You're finished." He didn't speak, didn't look at her, because he knew she was right. Sylvia had disappeared, exiled from the world she once ruled. And Daniel? He watched Evelyn walk past him, her head high, her power restored. She didn't offer him a hand, didn't give him a place beside her. That was his choice to make. Would he rebuild himself, or would he drown in his father's sins? The final scene. Evelyn stood in her new office, the skyline stretching before her. A framed photo sat on her desk. A younger Evelyn, pregnant, alone, a woman who had been left with nothing. And now she had everything. With a quiet, victorious smile, she turned away from the past, toward the future. She had won. And this time, no one would take it from her. "I built everything you tried to steal. And now I own you.